say things like, no, we don't have any laptop failures, not even our i9 HX chips. And for example, like OEM would say this Intel this is the same silicon as what's on desktop. Why would this fail? And they just repeat the line. We are not seeing any failures in laptop chips, even HX. Even if you ask them, repeat the line. It's because they know they don't really have a good answer, and they're scared to admit anything that could cause the bleeding to start gushing. And speaking from going from bleeding to gushing, from what I can gather from OEMs, they still have no idea what percentage of these chips are actually expected to be failures. That Intel will not give them any numbers whatsoever, and most people suspect it's because Intel still doesn't really know. That they know that this microcode update they're working on could help the issue, but they're not really sure if it will firmly solve it, or if it will make it so that instead of CPUs breaking in like a month from now, just have 6 months from now, they're not really sure if they'll be able to roll out in an effective way. I've actually heard misleading things behind the scenes. I shouldn't go into too much detail, but I do not get the sense that everyone at Intel believes the same things. That some of them think the microcode update will be more effective or more easily installed into BIOSes and maybe into newly produced CPUs, and there's others that think that this is never really going to be rolled out in a way that saves most of the CPUs. Anyways, and so overall, there's still just a sense of we're not sure if we know the problem or if we can even solve it. And finally, one thing that I also want to confirm at the end of this video is that I'm now 100% sure that oxidation is not the major issue for at least why rapid desktop chips are failing. It's just an issue that damaged some Sapphire Rapids and Rapid chips last year. For those who missed my leak from the end of last week, I put out a specific date range from there was a oxidation issue at the Arizona Chandler plant with Intel, and I have now been told by multiple people that is exactly what happened, exactly how you described it. And it did also damage Sapphire Rapids. But it's not really a problem that's ongoing. It's been solved. And so it's not really something that will materially hurt Intel directly moving forward. It's solved, right? But notice why I said material, okay? The thing that's going to cost Intel a ton of money, just in an obvious material way, is the fact that they're going to have to replace so many Rapid Lake CPUs. So the fact that the oxidation issue damaged Sapphire Rapids and Rapid Lake last year, yeah, it'll cost them some money, but it's not an ongoing issue that they couldn't afford to replace. It was just that they easily replace those RNAs, not a problem. No, it's not a material one, it's a legal problem. The problem with the oxidation issue is that it seems pretty obvious that Intel lied by omission to their partners, and you get the sense behind the scenes that Intel is happy to admit it happened, but they have publicly, because it kind of makes them have this near honesty. But they don't say more than that, or because they realize that it could be argued that they just straight lied to their partners, but a manufacturing issue they were obliged to tell them, and they're super scared they're going to be sued for that. And well, it doesn't really matter in my opinion. You can already see the lawsuits are coming, and I think they could get pretty bad on this one. Alright, so that is going to do it for this video. It was a super long one, but I have some really interesting information to share with you all. That's what's going on with the AMD Ryzen 9 delay. And also, of course, you can update on what I am sure about even more so when it comes to Intel Rapid Lake stability failures. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure that you like it, share it, comment down below from the algorithm, and then also make sure that you subscribe to Moore's Law's YouTube channel and the bell button. And of course, that you support us on Patreon. Patreon is the best way to support Moore's Law. Just $2 of entry tier, access to the Discord, you get access to questions, you get access to hundreds of episodes of Die Train that have no ads in them ever, and higher tiers getting more content. You cannot do this without our patrons, so please do that if you have money every month. But no matter what though, you made this part of the video. Let me know. Thank you for watching.
Should I add more?
Microsoft suffered a global outage yesterday, affecting access to many Microsoft 365 services. According to the BBC, even access to Minecraft was affected.
And Xbox Live, actually.
Unfortunately, Microsoft stated during the outage that Teams was not affected. So close. Meaning that app continues to barely function by design. The company also determined that the outage was due to a DDoS attack on its Azure cloud platform. The attack then activated DDoS protection mechanisms, which, due to an error in implementation, made the attack worse.
Great job, Microsoft.
What is going on over there? This incident comes less than 2 weeks after global infrastructure was knocked out by a faulty software update from cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike. Many businesses are still dealing with the fallout from that outage. The CEO of US-based Delta Airlines may be seeking damages of $500 million from CrowdStrike and Microsoft after being forced to ground thousands of flights and reimburse affected passengers for food and overnight hotel stays. That's a lot of money that Microsoft could be using to continue paying the best engineers for their worst work. There's been a lot of developments around deepfakes recently. Google announced it is updating their search algorithm to better handle explicit AI deepfakes. The changes will make it easier to remove deepfakes at scale and will penalize sites that host such content by demoting them in search rankings. Because the easiest way to hide non-consensual imagery is to place it on Google Search's second page. On top of that, the US Senate has introduced a bill for the No Fakes Act, which is meant to protect artists from AI deepfakes. While some, like artists, like the bill, others are worried the bill is overly broad and could allow for misuse. Meanwhile, last week the Senate unanimously passed the Defiance Act, which allows victims of non-consensual explicit deepfakes to sue individuals who knowingly produce, distribute, or receive those images. But that's not enough. The US government needs to crack down on AI deepfakes that are used for fraud and manipulation, says Microsoft, the company that arguably had a major role in making AI deepfake fraud so accessible. AI search company Perplexity has announced they will be sharing revenue with publishers whose content shows up in Perplexity's AI-generated answers. This comes a month after Perplexity got in trouble for plagiarizing content from multiple publishers. So while this revenue share may sound like a step in the right direction, I'm not sure Perplexity will be able to pay its sources when it's been failing to disclose where its answers even come from. Just handed out some money to people, I don't know who they were. Aside from dodging plagiarism accusations, there may be another reason Perplexity decided to offer a revenue-sharing deal: OpenAI's launch of their own AI-powered search tool, SearchGPT, last week. On top of that, Reddit is now blocking every search engine but Google's after making a deal with the search giant. According to Reddit CEO Steve Huffman, SearchGPT will be able to show results from the site thanks to a similar deal, but Huffman called out Perplexity for refusing to pay to access Reddit's data. Unfortunately, that means Perplexity users will have to miss out on treasures like a factually accurate 1,000-word comment about 18th century wheat agriculture written by someone called Ned the Nip Hunter. And that's not a real example, but it could be. We made it up. Quick bits are like shooting stars, except instead of making you go, whoa, they make you go, AMD has launched its new Ryzen 5000 desktop processors, the Ryzen 9 5900 XT and Ryzen 7 5800 XT, now available at retailers. Unfortunately for AMD, some US retailers also listed the not yet launched Ryzen 9000 series of CPUs, leaking the prices. Fortunately for consumers, it looks like the new chips will cost up to $100 less at launch than the current Ryzen 7000 series did. There's so many series going on right now. What are you doing, AMD? Meanwhile, Intel, who apparently spent 2 chip generations selling broken CPUs, has announced their Lunar Lake laptop CPUs will launch on September 3rd. At this point, I'll consider Lunar Lake a success if the chips don't burst into flame. Just go for that. Amazon has been forced to recall over 400,000 products. The US Consumer Product Safety Commission determined that Amazon is legally responsible for the defective products of third-party sellers, and that the platform failed to alert hundreds of thousands of customers to these serious risks. Those unsafe products include hair dryers without electrofusion protection, faulty carbon monoxide detectors, and children's pajamas that violate federal flammability standards. Turns out Amazon's delivery network is so vast, they offer same-day shipping to the afterlife. Meta has agreed to settle a privacy lawsuit with the state of Texas for a massive $1.4 billion. The lawsuit was filed 2 years ago and alleged Meta was using Facebook users' biometric data without permission to power the tag suggestions feature the platform introduced way back in 2011. You'd think Meta would learn to stay on the right side of the law since then, but an investigative report by the Wall Street Journal claims hundreds of ads for illegal drug marketplaces have appeared on Instagram and Facebook. Ads like this are dangerous to the impressionable users of Instagram, and perhaps insulting to the bots that still use Facebook. They can't even do drugs. Google is taking heat for a recent Olympics tie-in ad where a father gets the Gemini AI assistant to generate a draft of a letter from his daughter to an athlete she admires. Now, there's nothing wrong with taking a pre-written draft and personalizing it to fit your needs, but there is something ever so slightly icky about putting putting something as innocent and authentic as a child's letter to the celebrity hero through the same process. What would the AI say? Let's find out.
AI saved my daughter.
Maybe this fictional little girl will one day be a skilled athlete herself, but it'd be great if she also had some baseline literacy so that she doesn't have to sign documents with an X like a medieval peasant. And are you an awkward loner with $100 just lying around? Well, good news. There's a new high-tech wearable just for you. It's an AI conversation bot called Friend. It takes the form of a large, extremely noticeable necklace that listens and comments on everything happening around you, which is guaranteed to make other humans deeply uncomfortable. Friend, the company behind Friend, reportedly raised $2.5 million from investors. The company then apparently used $1.8 million of those dollars just to acquire the domain name friend.com, which sounds like a great way to lose a bunch of friends.
Just $99, you can get them back.
July 2024 was yet another crazy month for history books that future people will study centuries from now. But the future won't hear about the CrowdStrike disaster, bloody years, or broken intel chips. Instead, they'll ponder the meaning of these strange two words, hawk squawk. This viral meme forever changed the direction of the world's culture, but it's not the only squawk that was hawked recently. If you're an Apple fan, you might remember the unofficial Apple website that bears a similar name. This website was so popular that it was acquired by AOL, who of course ruined it and shut it down in 2015. Everyone forgot about it, but then it mysteriously reappeared this month with all the same authors from its early iPhone glory days. But if we look closely, the website is actually a zombie. Apparently some company in Hong Kong squatted on the domain and is now using it to pollute the internet with AI-generated slop. But it's not the only example of this world going down the toilet. And in today's video, we'll look at a ton of other crazy tech stories that you missed this month. Because this is a positive, inspirational YouTube channel, let's focus on the good news first. Node.js just got TypeScript support thanks to this recently merged pull request. Over the past 5 years, JavaScript runtime competitors like Dino and Bun have stolen Node's thunder by making TypeScript just work out of the box. But in the near future, you'll be able to write TypeScript in a Node.js file and run it without a compilation step. The trick behind this magic is that it doesn't actually do any type checking, but because TypeScript is a superset of JS, it instead strips the types from the source code and executes the JS parts. In other words, it works like type annotations in Python to give you better IntelliSense to catch bugs early. Speaking of which, a new blazingly fast, game-changing next-generation web framework just dropped called FastHTML. Before you roll your eyes though, it's not a JavaScript framework this time, but rather a Python framework sprinkled with HTMX with the intention of scaling down web dev complexity. What makes it unique compared to say Django or Flask is that you can author interactive components with straight up Python code. Then you can make those components interactive with HTMX by leveraging HTML instead of JavaScript. Now, while writing this code, you might consider using a new blazingly fast, game-changing next-generation editor like Z. Previously, Z was only available to Mac OS users, but now it's also available on Linux. And that's awesome because Z is fast, open source, and most importantly, written in Rust. But all that's completely useless if your CPU is broken. We learned recently from game developers and Intel itself that its 13th and 14th gen Raptor Lake chips have all kinds of problems. Intel was confused about why their stuff wasn't working, but since then they claim to have figured out the problem. They claim the problem is related to the microcode algorithm that regulates voltage for the chip. The high voltage is creating instability and likely permanently damaging these chips. Now, if you own one and it works fine, all you have to do is make sure your BIOS is up to date and that you run it with the Intel default settings. But if you have a bad chip, you'll likely need to replace it under warranty. But if you're a fan of money, another thing you should know is that Stripe has acquired its competitor, Lemon Squeezy. But many indie hackers nowadays say Lemon Squeezy is better. Well, now they're one and the same because Stripe has gotten so big that instead of competing, they can just buy its competitors out. Maybe it's time to build a Stripe competitor written in Rust, but after looking at the Stack Overflow survey results, I'm not so sure it's a good idea to learn how to code. As a professional developer, you're 50% more likely to be not happy at work than to be happy at work. And what's even more depressing is that nearly 50% of professional developers are just plowing through life in their comfort zone. And speaking of plowing, if you get into farming, you're statistically more likely to enjoy your job than being behind your desk. And that's why I'm pivoting to channel farming tutorials like roto-whacker moving systems in 100 seconds. But now it's time to shift gear to some weird news. But the International Mathematical Olympiad. As an American, I was nearly brought to tears when Team USA achieved a rare win over the nearly unstoppable Chinese team. The high school students in this competition are far smarter than anyone watching this channel, but there's a new competitor in town who's able to perform at the top of the silver medal distribution, and its name is Google Alpha Proof. It works by combining a large language model like Gemini with a reinforcement network called Alpha Zero, a model that taught itself how to master chess and Go. It takes a written problem like this and translates it into a formal functional programming language called Lean. Then it proceeds to generate many solution candidates and then attempts to prove or disprove them in Lean. The good news is that if you're a top 0.001% math prodigy, you still have an edge over AI, but the bad news is that the rest of us humans are totally cooked. But Google also teamed up with Harvard to cook up something even crazier, an AI model trained on a bunch of rap videos with the goal of creating a virtual rap brain or an algorithm called an inverse dynamics model. Now, it's no secret that big tech wants to replace human labor with subscription-based robot labor. The problem is that robots have poor dexterity and their movement is about as smooth as a white person dancing. But someday we might be able to put artificial rap brains in them to fix this. However, before Google can finish this diabolical plan, OpenAI wants to destroy them and just announced a preview of their own search engine called SearchGPT. LLM chatbots are a huge threat to Google's lucrative business model of selling ads, and OpenAI is in a unique position to reimagine the search engine. And someday soon, we might live in an internet dystopia where all web content is written by ChatGPT, then optimized by ChatGPT for the ChatGPT search engine, so it can be summarized for you by ChatGPT. The biggest AI news of July was Zuck's new llama, but right as this model was released, another open source leader, Mistral, also released a new model called Mistral Large 2, and its overall performance approaches that of GPT-4o and Claude. That's a threat to OpenAI's dominance, unless of course they go bankrupt first. The company's raised over $11 billion, but they're expected to spend at least $7 billion this year, $4 billion of which goes straight to Azure to rent the servers needed to train GPT-5. And the $20 ChatGPT subscription isn't going to pay the bills, but maybe if LLMs haven't actually plateaued, they'll come out of this with a super intelligence that no one can compete with. These models require tons of data, and they often resort to scraping public websites to get that data. And one of the best websites to scrape is Reddit, but Reddit just updated their robots.txt file, and now robots aren't allowed to scrape it unless you pay Reddit. Google is the only search engine that's paid up so far, which means that's the only place you can find the latest depressing content from your favorite pseudo-intellectual cringelords. But what you likely don't realize is that there's a dark underbelly to all this AI stuff, and it comes in the form of mass surveillance from big tech via the Content Authenticity Initiative. It includes big data companies, social media, chip manufacturers, and even camera manufacturers, who are all implementing something called C2PA, which embeds data into different types of media like images to determine where it came from and how it's been altered. They're doing this, of course, to protect you from disinformation and deepfakes, but the trade-off they don't tell you about is that it creates a mass surveillance apparatus for all media created on the internet. And this might be coming soon because the government just introduced the Copy Act, which in some cases would make it illegal to remove provenance data from media. And our ability to shitpost offensive memes anonymously on the internet would come to an end. Luckily, though, there's already rebels out there trying to combat this with tools like Hydrogen, which is designed to counter these watermarking schemes. But once again, because this is a positive, inspirational YouTube channel, I want to finish on a happy note. The biggest story in July was by far the CrowdStrike disaster, which shook out 8.5 million Windows machines. Millions of people missed their flights and delayed their vasectomy operations, but if you were affected, you may be entitled to compensation thanks to the incredibly generous offer of a $10 Uber Eats gift card from CrowdStrike, and that's enough to pay for about 1/3 of a Big Mac, so you don't have to finance it on a firm.
The ghost spin. I'm spinning like the ballerina. I never went to learn the lyrics. Take their ectoplasm. Delicious ectoplasm. What is with humans' desire to eat slime? Or is it just me? I don't know. I feel like kids like to eat slime. Like Play-Doh, Jell-O. Looks yummy, it does. But is there an example of like slime food? I guess like jelly maybe? Natto. But natto is gross. Natto is too slimy. Maybe slime is actually bad. The thing about slime is that like usually slime in nature is like bacteria. Did I go completely the wrong way? At least I'm clearing the place out of ghosts though. Oh! Ooh!
It was extremely popular in its heyday, with millions of gamers racing against each other. But that was nearly 20 years ago. Its popularity has died down with each new release in the series. These days, most of the world has moved on from Mario Kart DS. And yet, there's still a group of gamers who never stop playing it. There remain competitive leaderboards for Mario Kart DS. These are players who poured thousands of hours into the game, perfecting their driving and setting world records on each course. And the best player of all is awarded the title of Mario Kart DS World Champion. For the past 20 years, the champ title has changed hands many times, as the best Mario Kart DS players have come and gone. This is the history of the Mario Kart DS champion. November 14th, 2005, Mario Kart DS is released in North America, and launched right alongside it is the Mario Kart DS time trial website. These fan-made sites existed for each game in the series. Players could submit their fastest times on each track and compare against others around the globe. Mario Kart DS has 32 tracks. Each track saves both your fastest single lap and your fastest 3-lap race. So, that's a total of 64 times where racers could compete. Players submitted their times via email on Yahoo groups, and the very first player to send in times was the owner of the time trial sites, Mark Jones. He was a competitive Mario Kart 64 player, yet wasn't particularly good at Mario Kart DS. But since he was the first to submit, he became the world champion by default on November 15th, 2005. However, Mark would only be champion for one day, because on November 16th, someone else submitted all of their times, Michael Freed. Michael was a veteran of the series. He held world records in both Mario Kart 64 and Mario Kart Double Dash, and was still ranked very highly in each game. Unsurprisingly, he was also really good at Mario Kart DS, and he started sending in world record after world record. So, how did Michael get fast times in Mario Kart DS? Well, like most games in the series, it's important to take good lines with your kart and avoid any slowdowns. This same principle is seen in every Mario Kart game. But Mario Kart DS has another important mechanic not seen elsewhere, because right when the game was released, players discovered that the game's mini-turbo system could be abused, a mechanic known as snaking. By hopping into a direction, then rocking the D-pad left and right twice, you charge a mini-turbo that gives you a burst of speed. Now, in other Mario Kart games, these mini-turbos take a while to build up, and are designed to be used mostly on long turns. But in Mario Kart DS, they're much quicker. They take just 3/4 of a second to build up, and the boost you get can last longer than this. So, you can just non-stop charge mini-turbos through the whole race, alternating between left and right mini-turbos on straight paths. You have to constantly rock your thumb back and forth on the D-pad, through the entire race with little to no breaks. But if you can master it, it allows you to go much faster than normal. This is Mario Kart DS's most famous mechanic, snaking. Thanks to his mastery of snaking, combined with his experience in other Mario Karts, Michael Freed quickly became the game's best player. And November 19th, he actually held all 64 of Mario Kart DS's world records. Now, this was only 5 days after launch, so competition was limited, but those who submitted times could not keep up with Michael. On November 22nd, a player named Christopher McMullen managed to wrestle the champ title with Michael, but it was very easy. Later that same day, Michael took back a top spot, and then quickly made it back to 58 out of 64 world records. This dominance continued for weeks. While he couldn't hold all the records, Michael regularly held 40 to 50 of them. By January 2006, he'd been the champ for 2 months, essentially ever since the game's release. And finally, he began to see some competition. His record total started to fall, and that was only 38 out of 60. Even though he continued setting world records throughout the month, he was still slowly losing ground, and much of that was because of one challenger. By the end of January, a man named Miguel Rodriguez had moved into second place. Michael and Miguel were total opposites. While Michael was a seasoned Mario Kart veteran, Miguel had no competitive Mario Kart experience. He just happened to be really good at Mario Kart DS. Throughout January, Miguel chipped away at Michael's record total. At the end of the month, Michael's lead was just 29 to 18, and rapidly shrinking. That being said, the world record total is actually not how the champion is determined. Instead, it comes down to something a bit more balanced: average finish. Average finish is essentially your average rating across all tracks. The lower your average finish, the better. For instance, if half of your times were world records, but the other half were all in 50th place, your average finish would be 25. This score is much worse than a player who had no world records but is in second place on each track. That's an average finish of just 2. This system rewards consistency above all. The goal isn't just world records, but to get good times on every last course. Any weak times severely affect the score. So, even though Michael had a solid world record lead, Miguel had the more balanced time sheet. And as a result, his average finish had nearly caught up to Michael. And after a few more improvements, Miguel did it. He became champ despite holding fewer world records. For the first time since the day after the game's release, Mario Kart DS had a new champion. Over the next few months, the game became more popular and the champ title changed hands repeatedly. In April, a player named Lars Stelling briefly took the top spot. The very next day, Miguel beat him back, tied with Mark Jones for the shortest reign in Mario Kart DS history. A few weeks later, Michael became champion for the second time. However, his second reign would be much shorter than his first. Just 2 weeks later, Michael was surpassed by the number 5 ranked player, someone who would go on to be one of the greatest players in Mario Kart DS history, a man named Thomas Bolton. Thomas had been playing the game for months, but he was primarily a Wi-Fi player. This game was introduced in Mario Kart DS and allowed you to race against others online. Thomas played on Wi-Fi nearly every day, and he became simply amazing at it. It got to the point where he could beat literally any player in the world in a head-to-head race. And even though he mastered that game mode, he barely touched time trials. As it turned out, his Wi-Fi racing skills translated perfectly. Thomas finally joined the site in mid-2006 and immediately began setting world records. In a 4-day stretch in mid-June, he set 10 world records, causing him to overtake Michael and become the new time trial champion. Part of the key was all of his Wi-Fi racing. It had made Thomas an extremely consistent player. While other champions had grinded tracks over and over to obtain world records, Thomas needed to be consistent on all tracks to always beat racers online. So when he finally started playing time trials, the world records came flying in. This was too much for anyone else to approach. They could maybe take a record here and there with heavy grinding, but Thomas's consistency was off the charts. He surpassed everyone else in the world, and not Michael Freed nor anyone else could catch him. On July 21st, the weekly news update was titled, Bolton Unchallenged. He remained alone, easily on top of the average finish leaderboard. Although Thomas seemed invincible just weeks ago, Sasha Bronninger was making a meteoric rise. Out of nowhere, he went from setting a record every few weeks to setting them nearly every single day. Thomas was playing too, but he couldn't keep up. He was still number 1 for now, but if something didn't change fast, Sasha was about to pass him to become champ. Thomas did his best, but Sasha's records kept pouring in. And after a flurry of activity from Sasha in mid-August, a new champion was crowned. What had just happened? Mario Kart DS hadn't seen a player like Sasha before. Sure, guys like Michael Freed dominated the record table early on, but competition was much weaker back then. Now, even against a player of Thomas Bolton's caliber, Sasha was able to build a big lead that just kept growing. By the end of October, Sasha had 28 site records, Thomas had 17, and nobody else had more than 6. Sasha and Thomas were a cut above the rest, but one was clearly ahead of the other. Sasha was not only good, but also ruthless. Whenever Thomas posted that he'd set a new record, Sasha took that as a call to action. And within days or even just hours, Sasha always beat him back. It happened time and time again. There was almost something arrogant about Sasha's posts. They often had a smiley emoji, like he was daring to try and beat one of his times. If he did, he'd make sure it didn't last long. Other site members were absolutely invested in Thomas and Sasha's rivalry. There was a lot of debate about who was truly better. Most were on Thomas's side. They said the only reason Sasha was ahead was because he played 20 times as much as him. They said Sasha had no life, that Mario Kart DS was his only passion, but the leaderboard didn't lie. Sasha was the champ, not Thomas. And by mid-November, Sasha had become the longest reigning champ in Mario Kart DS history. But in December, Thomas made another push for the top spot, and this time, he took a different approach. Rather than chasing Sasha's records, he focused on all his other times, trying to get all 64 of his times into the top 3. This could still lower his average finish enough to make him champ, despite potentially not taking any new records. Sasha wouldn't have any world records to beat back. It was a smart approach, and it paid off. Thomas lowered his times on track after track, and by December 18th, Sasha's 131-day reign had come to an end. And Sasha beat him back. Despite actively playing, Thomas could only hold the top spot for 8 days. Sasha rattled off a few new records, and it was all over. He could do things that Thomas simply couldn't. And it just kept going. Sasha's world records came in on a daily basis. As 2007 rolled around, it seemed like there'd be no hope of ever dethroning him. Thomas had missed his one opportunity. But then, in early 2007, there were 2 big changes. Change number 1, the replay code. You may have noticed the lack of video footage thus far. That's because Mario Kart DS's built-in replay system is horrible. For other Mario Kart games, the replay of a race has the same camera angle as the race itself, directly behind the cart. But Mario Kart DS gives you 2 screens during the replay. The top screen is like an action movie, aerial shots of the race that change every few seconds. The bottom screen is just a map of the course. It's hard to see the actual driving with any level of precision, and when combined with camera quality back then, most world record videos from 2006 looked something like this. Are you enjoying this footage? No, of course you're not. But in February 2007, world record holder B-Dash found an action replay code that shows replays as if they're live. This was a huge boost for the quality of Mario Kart DS world records, and going forward I'll be able to show you more of them. Change number 2, the PRB leaderboards were created. Back in December 2005, a player named Minsan found something called Prolonged Rocket Boost, or PRB. By getting the maximum start boost and starting a mini turbo immediately, as long as you're able to snake and preserve this top speed, your kart enters the glitched state of PRB. You're then able to drive off-road without slowing down. PRB saves a variable amount of time. On tracks with no off-road areas like Waluigi Pinball, it saves nothing. But on tracks like GBA Luigi Circuit, it can save a few seconds. The key is that you can't stop snaking at all, or you lose PRB. It's very difficult and was deemed to be a glitch, so it was banned from all submissions to the website. But in March 2007, site admins revisited PRB and decided to allow it on its own leaderboard. Both PRB and non-PRB have near equal prestige, but since PRB allows for faster times overall, that's what we'll be tracking for the rest of this video. So, this was the state of the PRB leaderboards once the switch was made. Sasha was still number 1 and Thomas was number 2, by about the same margins as before. Number 3 was a player named Julio, and number 4 was a player named Fabian. These were the 4 best PRB players in the world, but Sasha still remained dominant, holding nearly half of the game's records on his own. Thomas, Julio, and Fabian were all friends who talked regularly, and the 3 of them were getting really frustrated with Sasha. For one thing, he didn't always post videos of his new records, while Thomas, Julio, and Fabian typically did. Yet Sasha seemed to be effortlessly beating their times, not letting them hold records for any period of time. It was almost like he was patrolling the forums, waiting for a new record to beat. The insults to Sasha continued. He has no life. The amount he plays isn't normal. Maybe they were right, or maybe they were just jealous. But it didn't matter. Other than one brief 8-day period, Sasha had held the top spot for the past 7 months. World records were effortless to him. Whenever Sasha saw a time was beaten, he could just pick up and play it to instantly beat it back. Then all of a sudden, in the middle of March, Thomas disappeared. He went from submitting times nearly every week to nothing. Nobody heard from him. And then, weeks later, the number 3 ranked player Julio also vanished. A short while after that, the number 4 player Fabian stopped submitting times too. One by one, the number 2 through number 4 players had all disappeared, as if they'd just given up. It was normal to take breaks, but for all 3 to suddenly stop at once, this was bizarre. All the while, Sasha just pulled further and further ahead. He had no active competitors, and his already huge leads continued to grow. But eventually, he grew tired of racing against himself. It wasn't fun with no competition. So, he too stopped playing.
By mid-May, it was very quiet at the top, with all 4 top players inactive. And then, on May 25th, 2007, it happened. It was a sneak attack. They'd been playing all along, but secretly so that Sasha couldn't play defense. For weeks, they'd been setting world records offline, and now that they'd done enough to affect Sasha's ranking, they suddenly posted them all. And the end result? If something like this were done today, there would be significant pushback, and the players involved would be heavily criticized or punished. But in 2007, most of the community cheered them on. They were excited about all the drama, and were especially happy that nearly all of these times had videos to go with them. In all, Thomas, Julio, and Fabian hoarded dozens of times, and took 12 records away from Sasha. What was Sasha's reaction to all this? Well, remember, he too was inactive when the reveal was made. But when he saw what happened, he simply said, if I make a comeback, the charts will look a bit different. But the comeback never happened. Sasha only submitted one more time before quitting the game forever. The community hasn't heard from him since June 2007. Now 17 years later, his Mario Kart DS page remains dormant, likely never to awaken again. Like it or not, Thomas Bolton was back on top. And underhanded tactics aside, he was still a very popular member of the community. Thomas regularly talked to players on the forums and raced against them on Wi-Fi. But here's the thing. Everything we've covered so far, from Mark Jones all the way to Sasha, was just from the first year and a half of the game's release. Nobody had been able to lock down the top spot for more than a few months. Well, with Thomas Bolton, that was about to change. Although his rise was controversial, Thomas became the best player the game had ever seen. With Sasha out of the way, he was able to go on a tear, setting world records like they were nothing. And by September 2007, he held an incredible 40 out of 64 world records. That's close to what Michael Free was able to do right after the game's launch. And now, in a much more competitive era, Thomas managed to do something similar. It was remarkable. Fabian was Thomas's biggest rival in 2007, but he could only hold about 10 world records to Thomas's 40, with the remaining few records scattered among several players. Thomas also set some of the longest-lasting records in the game's history during this period. In April 2009, he got a Choco Island 2 lap record that stood for the next 8 years unchallenged. It was a masterclass in PRB, taking flawless lines while snaking until right before the end. And yet, despite all these records, despite having a huge lead over everyone else, I still call this period the reign of indifference. For one thing, Thomas still preferred doing Wi-Fi races over playing time trials, and when he did, he didn't seem to care about his average finish at all. There were certain tracks he outright refused to play just because he didn't like them, like Rainbow Road and GameCube Luigi Circuit, which makes it all the more remarkable that, despite these preferences, he still had the lowest average finish by a mile. No one was even close. This pattern continued into 2008, as Thomas held on to about 40 world records. That summer, he began to get his first serious challenger, a player named Ben Stoneman. Ben's average finish began plummeting, going from over 7 in March to just 4.21 in June, and by September,
Because you're too embarrassed. Yes. Everyone just seems so busy. And I don't want to disturb anyone, so I just... It's okay. I'll help you. Really? Okay, it's a deal. That sounds... should I call you something different? Is my lord better? How about your excellency? Those are even worse. Master is fine, I guess. Qualified mage. Are you feeling tired? Are you serious? Don't worry. It's not a question of strength. Oh, I'm sorry. So... I just want to hear some of... May lines. Yeah, that's a good... Welcome home, Master. Is that okay? Great. It's perfect. We've reached the final step, Master. Please fill out the evaluation. It's okay. Please, rate me as you feel like... Such top talent. You're welcome, Corin. I know I still have, but... I wouldn't have been able to complete... Truly. You really do have a sweet tooth, Ellen.
It's because sweets are really... But they're also high.
Calories?
Hey, don't say it out loud. It's just that there haven't been many commissions. What's with that look? Is it that...
You had quite the reaction there, Elle.
Really?
It's all right. I get it. I would never...
I'll take your word. Oh, and speaking of which...
Why do you ask? Besides, it's not like you don't know our internautic...
Can't I call you... Never mind, it's not...
Of course you can call me Belle. Though, for this...
They've called me the adventure.
I didn't quite get...
I'm only saying it once.
September, it was genuinely getting close. Ben and Thomas were separated by just over half a point. However, despite their close average finish scores, Thomas still had an absolutely massive world record lead. Ben had a few world records, but all 64 of his times were good. Thomas had a lot of world records, while barely bothering to play certain other courses. In other words, Thomas was playing for records, while Ben was playing for champ. It was pretty clear that Thomas was the better player, he just didn't care. If he'd just play Rainbow Road, he could pull away and leave Ben in the dust, but he refused. What was it about Rainbow Road that Thomas couldn't stand? Well, it was one of the very few tracks in Mario Kart DS with shortcuts. The rail shortcut is done by jumping after using a shroom to land on the rail, ultimately skipping most of the loop. And the pipe shortcut is done by jumping off the road and fooling Lakitu into placing you further ahead on the track. Thomas had absolutely no interest in these shortcuts. He preferred a more consistent playstyle, like when racing others online. Shortcuts didn't fit into that mold at all, with very different mechanics to the rest of the game. So, Thomas's Rainbow Road time stuck out like a sore thumb in a sea of world records. Throughout the rest of 2008, Thomas and Ben remained deadlocked, as their average finish gap remained roughly the same. But in 2009, Thomas kicked it up another notch. In April, he increased his world record total to 46, while moving a full average finish point ahead of Ben. It all reached a peak in October 2009, when Thomas managed to hold 48 out of 64 possible world records. That's 75% of all PRB records in Mario Kart DS. Just incredible that someone was able to get this far ahead on a game that millions of people had played. Thomas felt that this might be his peak in Mario Kart DS. He'd been the champ for 2.5 years, and there were few courses where he didn't hold the record. Where else could he even go from here? All Thomas could do was sit around and wait for someone to get good enough to challenge him, and he thought that might be coming soon. It turns out, he was right. Although it had been smooth sailing for Thomas so far, 2010 would be a much different story. This is Abel. Abel had been playing Mario Kart DS since release, and joined the website in 2007. He became obsessive, playing as often as he could and learning from the best players at the time, Sasha and Thomas. He embarked on a slow, steady progression up the rankings. He entered the top 10 by mid-2008, and the top 5 by early 2009. He hadn't been a threat to Thomas so far, he just kept getting better. And now in 2010, he was officially a contender to the next PRB champion. There was also someone else. On Halloween night 2000, more than 3 years after Abel began playing, a weekly news update was posted. These posts talked about site activity from the past week, including ranking movements and world records. This week's update focused heavily on top players Thomas and Ben, and there was also a cameo from Abel, who at this point was ranked number 7. But as a footnote at the end of the update, there was mention of a new player who was improving rapidly. He was named David Roldan, and was still outside the top 100. What followed was one of the quickest ascents in Mario Kart DS history. Just 6 months later, David had made it all the way to the top 25. He had a very uneven approach to playing. Funnily enough, he was dominant on the one track Thomas hated, Rainbow Road. David held both the lap and free lap records there, while he lagged behind on most of the other 31 tracks. As quickly as he'd improved, he was mostly considered a one-track specialist. Incredible at Rainbow Road, but not a record contender anywhere else. But you see, today, 15 years later, David Roldan is better known by his online pseudonym, MK Dasher. And all of a sudden, in the second half of 2009, MK Dasher did this. The race to champ was on. Thomas still held a majority of records, but for the first time in years, there was a serious dent in his total. All 3 players continued playing and setting records, and their average finish gap shrunk. But suddenly in April, Thomas said he needed to take a break from playing. He was in school and had to focus on his studies for a while. This was Abel and MK Dasher's big chance to take the top spot. Both players duked it out over the next couple months. That May, Thomas officially lost his record majority. The tide was turning. Thomas's days on top were numbered. And on July 7th, Abel made a grand reveal. He'd set 15 new PRs, improving all of his lowest ranked times. None of them were new world records, but they helped lower his average finish just enough. Despite only holding 7 world records, Abel had become the new PRB champion. The greatest reign in Mario Kart DS history had come to an end. But the battle wasn't over. MK Dasher was still actively playing. Abel had to keep going or risk being dethroned immediately. And sure enough, just 3 days after Abel became champ, MK Dasher posted 7 new times to bolster his timesheet. Then more just a few days later. He was already closing in. Abel had to do something quick. He posted a couple PRs on July 25th to stay ahead, but on the 27th, MK Dasher posted 5 of his own. And guess what? Abel's reign as champ lasted just 20 days. MK Dasher now had a narrow average finish lead over Abel. Through the summer, both players continued their dogfight, and Abel took the top spot back in early September. After 3 years of no movement, the champ title was now constantly changing hands. On the world record front, MK Dasher had about twice as many records as Abel, but Abel's consistency on other courses balanced things out. However, their record totals still paled in comparison to Thomas Bolton. The only reason Thomas wasn't champion by a mile was because of his outright refusal to play Rainbow Road. His ranking on that course had nearly slipped out of the top 40. The fact that he was still in 3rd place overall was a miracle. If only Thomas had been willing to play Rainbow Road. But now, he hadn't been seen in months. His average finish was only going down compared to Abel and MK Dasher. And then, out of nowhere, for the first time in months, Thomas submitted a new time to the website. And guess which course it was on? He finally played Shortcut Rainbow Road. This wasn't an amazing time, barely ranking in the top 20, but it was an enormous improvement over 42nd place. This one time made his average finish drop by 0.45, enough to move Thomas back ahead of MK Dasher and Abel. The king was back on top. A few days later, he sent in more Rainbow Road times. This is what Thomas needed to do all along. Now, he had a decent average finish lead and a big world record lead. It was like a repeat of his last big reign. He seemed invincible to anyone else's challenge. However, Thomas was still quite busy with school, and after submitting a few more PRs in October, he once again stepped away from the game, potentially opening the door to MK Dasher and Abel. So, who would capitalize this time? Well, neither one was playing much at this point, perhaps a bit taken back by what Thomas did. Then in November, MK Dasher began submitting times again. And we know MK Dasher is good, but this was a totally different guy from a few months ago. He was setting a new PR nearly every single day, and as his average finish dropped, the community began to see who he really was. For months, MK Dasher, Abel, and Thomas had been trading the champ title back and forth. But now, MK Dasher was about to pull away, and do things that the game had never seen before.
Take this.
On November 8th, 2010, MK Dasher reclaimed the PRB championship. At this point, he had 16 world records, well behind Thomas' 20. But in 2011, he went on a world record spree, reminiscent of what Thomas himself did back in 2008. It was world record after world record. That August, he passed Thomas' world record total, never looked back. Even when he wasn't setting world records, he was still cleaning up his time sheet, improving his slower rate times. Perhaps No Man's 3-lap, for instance, one of his weakest times in 10th place, he lowered by a full second, a massive amount for a player of his skill, and good for 2nd place. MK Dasher now had a big average finish lead, in addition to a big world record lead. He was easily considered the game's premier player, and the only guy who could maybe compete with him at this point was Thomas. But once again, he was nowhere to be seen. Thomas played Mario Kart DS for years, and now that chapter of his life was gone. So, MK Dasher only had one real competitor during his career, a player named Rupa. Rupa appeared essentially out of nowhere in 2011. He joined the site and almost instantly began setting world records. But perhaps more impressive than his driving skills was his innovation. He implemented small pieces of tech that helped him save time in ways nobody else would do. For example, in Mario Kart DS, you lose a small amount of speed if you steer without drifting. Now normally this isn't an issue, since you're drifting through the whole race, but right at the start, you typically have to turn to set up your first mini-control. So to avoid a slowdown here, Rupa started doing a neutral hop. He hopped and turned in the air just before landing, letting him change his direction while preserving his forward momentum. He also started doing neutral hops at the end of some laps. After the last mini-turbo, instead of steering to face the finish line, Rupa started hopping without turning to preserve his forward speed. These were small time saves, but when combined with incredible driving, Rupa was able to build up a number of world records. He peaked in May 2012, with an impressive 13 of them. But just like Thomas Bolton, there were a number of courses he didn't care to play, so he was never much of a threat to take the champ title from MK Dasher. Then in 2013, Mario Kart DS entered a very inactive period. The game was 8 years old at this point, and its popularity had gradually died down while games like Mario Kart Wii took over. During its heyday in 2006, nearly 1,800 world records were set across the year. In 2013, that number was down to just 44. Most players had moved on, and even MK Dasher was playing much less than he used to. Despite the inactivity, players still set a handful of records, but they didn't put much of a dent in MK Dasher's record total. And that was the state of Mario Kart DS in the spring of 2014. MK Dasher was still the champ, but overall activity was very light. Perhaps the game just needed some kind of a spark. Other than snaking, Mario Kart DS had a reputation as one of the least broken Mario Karts. Only 3 out of its 32 tracks had shortcuts, and most of those were very minor. But now, 7 years after the last shortcut discovery, shortcut number 4 was found on Mario Circuit. On April 9th, 2014, Folk and his friend Toa found that by driving toward this wall with speed, then hopping on this raised slope, you could get enough air to land on top of the wall. It was quickly found that you could clear the wall entirely and use this as a shortcut, cutting out a bend to save about a second and a half. Now, this wasn't a very big time save, but it was enough that you had to get a time with this shortcut, or else your rank would fall way behind and hurt your average finish. And sure enough, within days, MK Dasher was back and setting new records on Mario Circuit. His first submissions to the site in over a year. It rejuvenated his love of the game, and he began playing more than ever, like grinding for the first sub-1 on Sky Garden. He even found his own new shortcut on Rainbow Road, the Loop shortcut, a faster and easier replacement for the Rainbow shortcut. MK Dasher was more active than he'd been in years. His world record lead had increased, and his average finish was leaps ahead of anyone else. At this point, he'd already been the champ for nearly 4 years, and although he faltered slightly while taking a break, his lead was once again growing and he separated from others again. How long could this go on? Could anybody catch MK Dasher? Then, in June 2014, there was an unexpected post on the forums. Thomas Bolton was back. Over the last 4 years, Thomas had barely touched Mario Kart DS, but since the game's official Wi-Fi servers were shutting down, Thomas wanted to come back and play a bit more. And this time, he was going to focus heavily on playing time trials. Now look, Thomas had been a dominant champ back in 2008, but that was years ago. He'd been passed up by MK Dasher. How good could Thomas be in 2014? He still set world records? Thomas Bolton came back out of nowhere, set 8 world records in just over a week, and beat MK Dasher to take back the champ title. His skills hadn't gone anywhere. In fact, he was playing better than he'd ever been. This was despite not playing competitively at all in over 4 years. Although he resisted shortcuts in the past, Thomas decided to try the new ones on Mario Circuit and Rainbow Road. And he actually posted respectable times, as high as 6th place on Rainbow Road and 3rd place on Mario Circuit. But even more important, Thomas was directly outdueling MK Dasher on some of these records. For instance, in June, MK Dasher had set a new lap record on Donut Plains with some minor strategy changes. But when Thomas returned, he decided to play it too and beat the time that MK Dasher just posted. He got the record and ultimately helped him pass MK Dasher for champ. Thomas and MK Dasher were both extremely active over the following months. They each set world record after world record. These two stood head and shoulders above the rest. They had 41 records between them, while nobody else had more than 8. This was a beautiful period for Mario Kart DS. The two best players the game had ever seen, battling it out and trading the champ title back and forth. But all good things must come to an end. While the summer months of 2014 had rampant record activity, by the end of the year, things had slowed down. By early 2015, the dust had more or less settled. Thomas was just ahead of MK Dasher as a PRB champion, but they were now both inactive, sitting low at the top, holding the majority of the game's records. 2015 was another quiet year for Mario Kart DS. Thomas was in the middle of his 7th reign as champ, but he wasn't actively defending his title. So the door was open for somebody new to make a move. And that summer, guess who made a charge toward the top spot? That's right, it was Ben Stoneman. You might remember Ben from 2008, when he got fairly close to Thomas but couldn't quite get there. That was kind of the story for Ben. Always in the top 5, but never the champ. But with both players ahead of him out of the way, Ben saw a chance to move up. He set a number of PRs that beat Thomas but not MK Dasher, causing MK Dasher to briefly move ahead of Thomas for champion. But Ben kept going, eyeing the top spot for himself. That October, he took the Luigi's Mansion lap and 3-lap records. It was enough to push him over the top. For the first time in 5 years, someone other than Thomas or MK Dasher was the PRB champion on Mario Kart DS. Now, part of the reason Ben was on top was because of other players in activity, but he was still an incredible player in his own right. Of the 35 records set in 2015, Ben did more than half of them. He also set 21 total records during his reign as champ, and on some courses he was flat out dominant, like Luigi's Mansion and Yoshi Circuit. He lowered the records repeatedly on these courses, and for years nobody could touch him, not even Thomas or MK. Throughout 2016, there was very little movement. Ben was the only active top player, and he had a small but stable lead in average finish. But it's worth noting that Ben was considered a little weaker than the champs right before him. Thomas and MK Dasher were both inactive, and he'd taken advantage of the opportunity. Ben still had a very strong time sheet, but he didn't have that many world records. It was generally believed that if either Thomas or MK Dasher came back, Ben's status as champion would be very vulnerable. And then, for the first time in 2 years, MK Dasher set a world record. It was on GameCube Luigi Circuit, thanks to a new strategy developed by Toa. In the description, he said he had a bit of free time this summer to play Mario Kart DS again, but don't expect a long comeback. Well, 2 weeks later, after After world records on the Weezy Circuit and Weezy Mansion, MK Dasher had beaten Ben Stiller. And over the next month, he set records on Peach Circuit, Choco Island 2, Hoopa Beach 2, and Rainbow Road. MK Dasher hadn't missed a beat in the last 3 years. In fact, it seemed like he was playing even better than before. He was setting world records with an ease that he never had. By late August, he was up to 22 world records. That fall, his world record quest continued. MK Dasher was gaining record after record, and he just kept going. This was MK Dasher at his absolute best. He had no challengers. This continued through all of 2018, and by June of 2019, MK Dasher held 35 world records, the most records any one person had held since Thomas Bolton in 2010. Of these 35 records, 2 of them stood out above the rest, because they were the 2 longest-lasting world records in the game's history. The first was MK Dasher's Shroom Ridge 3-lap record, set way back in August 2009. Shroom Ridge is a uniquely difficult course. First off, it's one of the longest tracks in the game. It also has cars all over that you need to avoid, making ideal lines harder. There's upward and downward slopes that affect mini-turbos, and it's extremely hard to keep PRB so you can drive over the grass in the middle section. In August 2009, MK Dasher got a 137.856, a really good race that took risky lines between the vehicles and the wall, and it stood as the world record throughout the long reigns of Thomas Bolton, Ben Stoneman, and MK Dasher himself. Players got close over the years, but nobody could quite get there. Finally, in September 2020, Max beat the record after an 11-year reign on top, only for MK Dasher to beat him back for 7 days later. His other long-lasting record was the Sky Garden lap record from February 2010. This is one of the few tracks in the game with a shortcut. You have to keep PRB, press R to hop at the last moment, then shroom and precisely navigate to recover speed. MK Dasher was easily the best player this year, which is why his 18.757 lap also took 11 years. In May 2021, it was finally beaten by Boreas, and this time it took MK Dasher longer than 7 days to beat back. It took him 8 weeks. Nobody else came close to MK Dasher. In the past, even when he was the champ, he had competition like Thomas and Ben, but now there was really nobody. He held a majority of world records, and had been the champ for the past 3 years with a massive lead. MK Dasher seemed untouchable, but who are we kidding? We've seen this before. No matter how dominant the champ, no matter how amazing the player, nobody stays on top forever. On the evening of September 20th, 2020, a player named Nikiri posted in Discord that he'd stumbled upon somebody new. This person's name was Taiga, and he just posted a video of a 156 on Waluigi Pinball. That was an incredible time, and good for 2nd place overall. Nobody had heard of this guy before. Taiga hadn't submitted to the site and showed no progression of his times. There was just a near world record sitting on his YouTube page with no elaboration. Over the next week, a couple more of these elite level times popped up on Taiga's channel, including a 2nd place time on Skyguard. And then, on September 25th, Taiga uploaded another one. He had just beaten MK Dasher's Bowser Castle world record. That same day, he posted a video scrolling through his PRs on each course, and it showed that he had an elite time on nearly every track in the game, including 4 world records. Who was this guy? Where did he come from? Taiga just suddenly popped up with no progression required to use contact, and beaten 4 world records held by the game's very best players. These were veterans who'd been playing the game for years, and he'd beaten their times like it was nothing. Oh, and one other important thing to note, Taiga was 11 years old. Taiga's videos were uploaded by his parents, who said in the description that he was in 6th grade, and most of the community realized this had to be right. There was no way an 11-year-old could come along and single-handedly take down times that a community of veterans had played for years to achieve, right? I mean, some of these guys have been playing since before Taiga was 11 years born. These videos were either faked or played by some veteran who was trolling the community. But when they asked for proof, Taiga responded with a hand cam video showing it really was him playing. This was actually real. An 11-year-old had somehow become one of the best Mario Kart DS players on Earth, and he was beating records that were set when he was a toddler. Although there was limited footage of him driving, top players could tell that Taiga had inhuman consistency. He was also playing with a 3DS circle pad, which was virtually unheard of among top players. Taiga only had 4 world records, but it was clear that he had the potential to get way more, perhaps even enough to rival MK Dasher. But nobody knew what would happen next. Would Taiga fade away, or keep setting records? Well, Taiga did indeed keep playing. By the end of 2020, he increased his record total from 4 to 6. It wasn't the world record domination that some had predicted, but he was still hanging on to his fair share of records. Maybe climbing all the way to the top was unrealistic for 11-year-old Taiga, but he carved out a niche for himself in the Mario Kart DS community. Or maybe he was just getting started.
Fine. What a pain.
Taiga had ascended the mountain. After 9 months of heavy playing in 2021, he nearly made it to the top. All the while, MK Dasher was playing and setting his own world records, but he kept losing ground to Taiga. For every record that he set, Taiga got multiple others, and the result was the complete erosion of his world record lead. On September 17th, 2021, it officially happened. Taiga passed MK Dasher's record count. But was this enough to make him the champ? How did his average finish compare to MK Dasher? Well, overall, Taiga had an incredible time. If he didn't have the record on the course, he was usually in 2nd place. One notable exception. These were his Moo Moo Farm ranks. Taiga was pretty disconnected from the rest of the community and seemed to not care at all about average finish. So, even though he passed MK Dasher in nearly every metric, Moo Moo Farm prevented him from officially being champ. MK Dasher still held the crown. By late 2021, MK Dasher gave up trying to compete with Taiga. He realized it was a pointless endeavor. Instead, he focused on grinding individual tracks he enjoyed, like Rainbow Road, lowering these records over and over. He knew his champ status could disappear at any moment. Meanwhile, Taiga kept playing too, setting new records while also lowering ones he already had. By mid-2022, his world record lead had grown, despite still not technically being the champ. And then, in October 2022, it happened. Taiga played Moo Moo Farm. It was far from perfect. On his 3-lap time, he missed a mini-turbo and hit a wall at the end, but his driving was still incredible overall. He improved his times from outside the top 150 to 3rd place, and finally, it was made official. Taiga was the champion of Mario Kart DS. Could MK Dasher respond? Well, in 2023, he went all in, doing everything he could to close the gap between himself and Taiga. But no matter what MK Dasher did, he remained 5 to 10 world records behind Taiga. Even when he managed to beat a few of Taiga's records, Mario Circuit 1, Donut Plains 1, Figure 8 Circuit, Taiga always beat him back in a matter of weeks. It was reminiscent of what Sasha did to Thomas back in 2007. Before MK Dasher knew it, his progress was always undone. He then turned to cleaning up his timesheet instead of chasing world records. This helped close the average finish gap somewhat, but Taiga still had a comfortable lead. This continued throughout all of 2023. Both players were active and improving their PRs. By early 2024, Taiga had been on top for a year and a half, and despite MK Dasher's best efforts, he hadn't been able to pose much of a threat. That was the status quo, all the way until April 2024, when there was a revolution. On April 5th, 2024, someone new popped up in the Mario Kart DS Discord server, Zumo de Kaya. Right away, he started asking about a potential glitch on Luigi's Mansion. He was wondering if it was somehow possible to bounce high enough to go through the wall and down to the floor below. Players had already seen bounces like this before. They weren't consistent enough or big enough for anything meaningful. But Zumo was an experienced glitch hunter. He knew what he was doing, and as he kept experimenting with different angles and steering, his bounces began to get higher. Other players started to take notice, and one named Juan began experiments of his own. A few hours later, Juan posted that he had done it. He bounced over the wall and clicked down later in the track. This was Mario Kart DS's first new shortcut in more than 10 years, and it was about to kick off a revolution of new shortcuts, all revolving around this one technique, the super bounce. Here's how it's done. You must angle your cart back in the air while falling, press R on the frame you land next to a wall, then steer perpendicular to center. This allows you to get massive air and potentially skip certain sections of the track. The super bounce opens up the door to many new shortcuts, but it's limited somewhat because of the game's checkpoint system. Each track has a number of key checkpoints you must drive through, and if you miss one, the lap won't count. So, if your super bounce causes you to miss a key checkpoint, you won't complete a lap upon crossing the finish line. Ultimately, Zumo, Juan, and others collaborated to find 3 new shortcuts using the super bounce. The first new RTA-viable shortcut since 2014. The first was on Luigi's Mansion, which you've already seen. It saves about 1.5 seconds, and is also the hardest of the 3 shortcuts. You can see you're not skipping any key checkpoints by cutting out this section of the track, so the lap works. The second shortcut was on Delfino Square, and used an idea theorized years ago by a player known as Nine. You jump off the lift, hit the bridge to bounce and tilt your cart back, then super bounce over the wall to skip a section of the track. Just like Luigi's Mansion, this shortcut also saves about a second and a half. But the biggest time saving of the 3 shortcuts, and also by far the easiest, was on Waluigi Pinball. It's performed after a long fall from the zipper, and by using a mushroom, you can make it all the way to the bottom of the pinball machine. It saves close to 9 seconds per lap, blowing the other 2 shortcuts out of the water. The Waluigi Pinball shortcut was first hit in the world record by iMappy on April 13th. iMappy is a Mario Kart shortcut aficionado, who's hit shortcut world records in several Mario Kart games. It only made sense that he was the first to hit this one in Mario Kart DS. But what about our world champions? They were used to incredibly fast racing without shortcuts. How did they adapt to the super bounce? Well, Taiga did briefly take a Waluigi Pinball lap record, but there's no footage of him ever using the shortcuts on Delfino Square or Luigi's Mansion. He did manage to hit a new lap shortcut on GameCube Luigi Circuit, but for the most part, he stuck to non-shortcut racing. MK Dasher, on the other hand, well, he got good at the super bounce. At times, he's held all 6 shortcut records across the 3 super bounce courses. He's mastered the shortcuts themselves, and when combined with his driving skills, he can outmatch nearly any player in the world on these courses. The shortcut revolution was giving MK Dasher a leg up on Taiga, and as a result, it's brought him right back into the competition. On April 14th, MK Dasher took the champ title from Taiga, and ever since then, they've been trading it back and forth. As of now, MK Dasher is officially the PRB champ. He holds a very slight lead over Taiga, thanks in large part to his shortcut records. Their rivalry is stronger than ever. They hold a combined 61 out of the game's 64 world records. And as exciting as their futures will be, it's just a small part of Mario Kart DS's history. These are the best players to ever touch Mario Kart DS. Their records, their struggles, and their stories live on, and they'll remain a part of this game's legacy forever. Thanks for watching.
China is a culturally rich ancient civilization that has survived the test of time and is still around today. Quite a rare achievement not many nations can boast, and thus deserves the attentive studying of its diverse story, saturated with the rise and fall of kingdoms and dynasties ever since the Xia dynasty in 2070 BC. So, let's get started. The Xia dynasty of China is the first dynasty to be discovered. Right, with that all over with, let's focus on modern China. Modern China begins at the end of the dynasties. Revolutionaries thought the emperors were not modernizing enough, allowing Western powers to insert their annoying imperial influences in China. The Qing dynasty was overthrown with the Wu Chang uprising, when a bomb accidentally exploded and the revolutionaries were like, well shit, they're just gonna blame that on us. I guess the revolution starts now. Establishing the Republic of China in 1912. Dr. Sun Yat-sen, a bona fide god to the Chinese, became the first provisional president, although he actually didn't directly participate in the uprising. He was in Denver, Colorado at the time, but he was a leader. Sun Yat-sen struck a deal with General Yuan Shikai, commander of the new army, that if he could get the last emperor of China to renounce his rule, he'll get to be the president. This didn't prove to be a challenge, considering Emperor Puyi was literally 6 years old at the time. Hey kid, I'll make you a deal. You can either spend all day ruling over all these losers, being revered amongst men, or you can have this real sick yo-yo. So Yuan Shikai became the official president of the Republic of China, finally ending 3,000 years of dynasty rule. But that wasn't good enough, and a few years later he pulled Napoleon and declared himself emperor. Understandably, the Chinese people having just ended an emperor's reign did not find this very cash money, and he abdicated in 1916, dying shortly after, thus beginning the warlord era. China shattered into multiple regions, ruled by various warlords, but our hero Sun Yat-sen and the nationalists haven't given up on unified China, but he needed help establishing alliances with the Soviet Union and the Chinese Communist Party. Because hey, what could go wrong with an alliance between 2 groups of people with fundamentally different ideologies? It worked out totally fine for the Fire Nation and the rest of the world in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Yeah, I'm watching a kid show, so what? Fuck you. Chiang Kai-shek takes control of the Nationalist Party after Sun Yat-sen bites the dust in 1925, working with the communists who were all like, God, these warlords are annoying. Luckily, we're close to a unified China. Yeah, those warlords are gross. You wanna know who's really gross? Them commie bastards. Yeah, wait, what? Cheng turns on the communists, not resting until he chased all of their armies out of the Nationalist Party, igniting the Chinese Civil War. Both sides trying to, wait, what's going on up here? And we'll worry about that later. Chiang Kai-shek almost had the communists defeated until they embarked on the famous Long March across treacherous terrain all the way to the northwest, during which they recognized Mao Zedong as their leader, who will henceforth be shown with a halo so don't get wall-banged by a CCP hit squad. Anyway, after a tussle over a bridge, we're now at war with the Japanese, leading the Nationalists and the Communists to set aside their differences and form a united front against them. Then, with the help of the US and allies, they defeated Japan, ending the Second Sino-Japanese War and World War II. They were victorious. They succeeded in ending the long 14-year atrocity-filled Japanese occupation of China, their beloved homeland, their ancient culture-rich civilization, once again finally free from the searing claws of tyranny. Full-scale civil war breaks out again, with the communists accomplishing an incredible comeback fitting for a Rocky movie, routing Chiang Kai-shek and the Nationalists to Taiwan in 1949. Scholars debate on exactly how the communists are able to come back. Some attribute it to Mao's charismatic ability to persuade peasants and farmers, gathering their support by promising communism would improve their lives, and that they'd never, never go hungry again. Now in power of the mainland, Mao set on creating a new socialist state, the People's Republic of China, declaring that the working class would be leaders of a people's democratic dictatorship. So yeah, you get to vote. Promised equal rights for women, rent reduction, land distribution, freedoms of thought, person speech, assembly, publication, association, religion, and much, much more. You know, all the things China is known for today. To go about tackling land distribution, Mao had a little brainstorming session. Sir, how can we conduct a massive overhaul of the land ownership system? I suppose, if we must, we will execute a few powerful landlords. Damn it, Jimmy, I'm not happy to do it, but it's for the good of the nation. Mao looked around at the world and saw that our nation wasn't really certified banking unless you had a lot of steel output. But instead of taking updated steps to industrialize over time, Mao wanted it now. Yeah, so get this. How about instead of your usual farming and selling all your extra crop, we keep the you farming part, but we take all your crop for the important people. Wait, so we get no food? No. We'll get back whatever's left over. This hardly seems fair. What if I also told you you're gonna build steel furnaces in your backyards, filled with, whatever you get your hands on, maybe your furniture. Wait, what? All in all, the Great War was a disaster, resulting in the worst famine in human history, with upwards of 45 million deaths. But hey, numbers don't matter when you're living in a
Democratic People's Dictatorship.
Hey, remember that culturally rich aspect of China? Yeah, well, that was all like culturally rich, more like belongs in a ditch. Culture's for nerds. With the failure of the Great Leap Forward, Mao wanted to reignite that sweet, sweet revolutionary fever. Bands of millions of students were formed into paramilitary Red Guard groups and were sent on an IRL match of search and destroy. Except instead of an enemy team, they faced civilians, and instead of defusing a bomb, they burned books and relics. These student groups sought to destroy anything considered bourgeois, anything representing capitalism, religion, tradition, and the West. They shut down schools, destroyed religious and cultural artifacts, and killed intellectuals and party elites believed to be anti-revolutionaries. This decade-long revolution left Chinese culture as destroyed as the Star Wars canon after the Disney acquisition. Fucking bullshit. So, in summary, the Cultural Revolution crippled the Chinese economy, destroyed centuries of culture, and had an estimated death toll of hundreds of thousands to as much as 20 million, with 100 million persecuted. The revolution only ended with Mao Zedong's death, giving him the highest KD in history of 78 million to 1. So who's a true gamer here? Deng Xiaoping became paramount leader after Mao, and noticing Singapore's economic boom, introduced some nifty economic reforms. Hey, so things kind of suck around here, so why don't we loosen our grip a smidge with some decollectivization and open some, get this, special economic zones for foreign investment and free market? Yeah, I don't know, that kind of sounds like capitalism to me. No, we'll call it socialism, with Chinese characteristics. And we'll still be the Chinese Communist Party with a bloody chokehold on the masses. Well, okay. We promise it's bloody. In 1989, students started to go, hey, for being a people's democratic dictatorship, we seem to be missing a lot of that democratic part. Yeah, and whatever happened to all those promised freedoms of speech and press? Yeah, hey, we should, like, protest. China takes control of Hong Kong from Britain in 1997, and the people rejoice. From this point onward, the CCP pretty much developed an anxiety disorder and saw everything and anything as a threat. Got a spiritual yoga practice, gaining too many followers, ban it, torture them, harvest their organs, fancy new tech allowing global connection and mass communication, regulate it, remaster the Great Wall, hire commentators to spam pro-party ship hosts, got a pesky Nobel Prize winner spitting fat bars of truth, arrest him, don't let him speak at his trial, make him die in prison. Current dictator, President Xi Jinping, has become the most powerful Chinese leader since Mao Zedong, having successfully eliminated those annoying term limits in 2018. Xi's rule of China can basically be perfectly compared to a self-conscious yet egotistical preteen. Wants to be the center of attention, doesn't like to share, probably smells like a Capri Sun. For example, the South China Sea is the resource-rich heart of trade in southern Asia, but according to the UN, the country can only utilize resources 200 nautical miles from its closest shoreline. But that's not fair, Xi said. According to this ancient map, we should have all this territory. Oh, you mean those 9 vaguely located lines drawn and claimed by the other China nearly a century ago? Yeah, no, you get 200 miles off your shoreline, and that's plenty. Off of our shoreline, you say? So, in an attempt to bypass the system, Xi decided, fuck it, let's extend our shoreline, and literally created islands throughout the sea, claiming territory overlapping neighboring nations and taking pot shots at foreign fishermen just trying to get some hitsamabushi for dinner. It got to the point where the UN had a trial on whether these islands can be counted as legit, looking at China's process of just dumping seismic fuckloads of sand on coral reefs, easily declaring, yeah, that's not how islands are made. But Xi, being the lovable bad boy he is, went, true. But I'm gonna do it anyway. It has been increasing regional tensions while reaping sea resources ever since. So in conclusion, while China has very interesting history and amazing contributions to humanity, such as gunpowder, paper, and the first ever live crab vending machine, calling the president Winnie the Pooh or believing in a religion may result in the forceful removal of your organs 6 out of 10 stars.
Sometimes, when a painting arrives at the studio, upon first glance, all of the problems are laid bare. It is patently obvious that they need attention, ASAP. And such is the case with this lovely portrait. Obscured with a heavy layer of surface grime and discolored gold varnish, the true colors are not even evident. But upon closer examination, we can see holes and a wholesale flaking of the paint from the canvas. This piece is incredibly unstable. Merely handling it runs the risk of losing some of the paint. On top of all of this, there is evidence of old conservation, some visible and some hidden. And all of this will need to be reckoned with. In addition, the interventions of the past have begun to fail. The lining is separated from the stretcher, and the adhesive between the old and new canvases has given way, causing a separation. The stretcher isn't even correctly sized to the painting, and as a replacement, it has failed too, breaking in multiple places. And while those problems are patently obvious, the full picture has yet to reveal itself. For this painting, there are secrets and sins on the road to salvation. This painting is a portrait of Sir Edward Hyde, a politician and advisor to Charles I and II, kings of England, and he lived a full and, well, interesting life. But such is the case with the royals. Who doesn't love an intriguing story? And the settings for all of this drama and intrigue, this fascination with the English monarchy, well, the setting for it are the beautiful manors, estates, and castles of royal Britain. Before salvation, before the sins are revealed, and before the secrets shown, well, the painting needs to be stabilized, and that begins with a washikozo, a Japanese mulberry paper renowned for its strength. A layer of fish glue,
derived from the collagen and proteins of fish, is laid on across the washi kozo. It penetrates through the paper and adheres this delicate but strong paper to the face of the painting. Because it's so flexible, it will contour to the various textural changes of the paint film wherever it's flaking, and once dry, it will hold all of that delicate paint in place. Without this step, without this technique, we run the risk of losing some of that paint which has already detached from the canvas during further interventions. This is an absolutely critical step, and without it, no work could take place. But for now, we say goodbye to Spread Hide. We'll see him again later, but, well, you'll find out. Once the fish shell is dry and the paint is stabilized, the canvas can be removed from the stretcher. And in the case of this stretcher, it's not that difficult because it has largely separated already. Many of the tacks have pulled through, and you can see that the stretcher is broken in multiple places. Apparently, it was glued back down the canvas to the wood edges, and that needs to be removed. Certainly not an archival or conservation technique, but one that was probably implemented to, well, save off the stretcher. With the stretcher removed from the canvas, we can begin exploring removing lining, and it appears that it is removing itself. Sometimes linings are very well bonded to the canvas, and sometimes, as in the case of the painting, they are only the suggestion of well bonded. Clearly, not enough adhesive or poor adhesive or poor technique or not all of the above have treated this line failing in spectacular fashion. But that's good for me because it is easier, and removal yields less trauma, less stress, and less work on the canvas. Now, in some cases, I do need to use a small power knife to get underneath the canvas between the wheels and separate it from the wood. This canvas is so brittle that it is tearing into pieces as I get off, and in the case of painting hand, well, poor people on this painting. But for my money, I would rather painting with older drills when old techniques will not be great, and the removal is rather easy, certainly more so than the alternative. This canvas seems to be in pretty good condition. As I'm clearing off the excess dirt, we don't see any major holes or tears or even any weak spots that would warrant an intervention of lining. But there still is a layer of old adhesive, and that needs to come off from the next treatments. And so I will use a substance called laminate, a synthetic clay that effectively gels water. Once left to sit, I can come back with a stiff nylon brush and break down the adhesive. That same glue because it is hygroscopic, meaning that will absorb and moisture. It will swell and soft glue back. Now because it is just a very thin layer of that same glue here, clearly not enough to on canvas and not enough, I don't use a scalpel. I use a stiff nylon brush and a towel knife to scrape off the excess. And then I can come back with a slightly damp cotton ball and lift off the layers of remaining. Passing over it with a shop towel, and we have beautiful canvas. This process will take place across the entirety of the canvas, and meticulously working to remove any excess Radisson glue. Now, it is impossible to remove all of the Radisson glue, including that is embedded in the canvas as a side effect before the canvas is primed or a ground layer. We don't want to remove all that because it does add some structural stability to the canvas, a little rigidity, and it can cause some effective paint back there. But the layers of the top of the canvas is automatic. Not only will it absorb ambient moisture and cause canvas to distort, expanding the trap, but it can attract pests from rodents to insects, and that can cause certain doom for a painting. Once the facing is dry, painting will be transferred to the hot table and lay down on a release layer. That's the greenish thing that's sitting on top of the blood paper. The release layer allows moisture and heat to pass through while preventing the painting from sticking to the absorbed blood paper. This is often the case if there is excess Radisson glue on the painting. The painting and table will be brought to temperature, the air removed via vacuum pump, and then the paint layer gently forced down with a balsa wood brayer. Once the hot treatment is complete, the painting is transferred over to another table, pressed under felt and new water paper, and waits for a few days while it acclimates, and any residual moisture is absorbed by water paper and gravel. The painting is then transferred over to a release film, face down, where an adhesive is applied to the back. Before the adhesive can be applied, though, any little bit of paper or fuzz or anything needs to be removed. The adhesive is heated up, and once brought to temperature and thinned out to the appropriate consistency, it can be rolled onto the back of the painting. Certainly it can be brushed on or sprayed on, but rolling on gives the most even distribution of adhesive and has most control. Not to mention this adhesive is pretty noxious stuff, so spraying it is something I like to avoid at all costs. Back and forth, and even distributing this adhesive is an everything. I want to make sure there are no puddles or pools. The whole point of applying the adhesive to the back of the canvas was to address the instability of the paint. Because that adhesive was thinned out, it can penetrate through the canvas and fill all of the voids between the canvas and the paint. It will settle in all those nooks and crannies. The adhesive then cools and dries. Much of the solvent that carry the adhesive evaporates, and then the whole painting can be placed on the hot table in a new envelope with release film on the back bottom. The envelope can be adhered to the table, the air can be sucked out, and the table brought up to temperature. When it reaches this temperature, the adhesive will be activated and become liquid. The vacuum pump will force the adhesive into and through all those nooks and crannies while pressing the paint layer down, and this, once cooled, bonds paint back down to the canvas. The process of adhesive impregnation takes several hours from start to finish, and once the table is cooled, the paint can be removed from the envelope. Because the release layers were used, the paint did not get glued down to the table. This is a lesson that has no value in the second time around. At this stage, I'm ready to remove the wash coat facing that we applied to protect and stabilize all that loose paint. Because the adhesive impregnation has now been completed, all that paint is now bonded down to canvas and not the wash coat. So with a little warm water and a little bit of effort, I can peel back all of this facing. And we can see that none of the unsafe paint is coming to the facing, because the fish gelatin is a weaker bond than the adhesive impregnation, and it's designed to be removed. Here on the face, where the paint was particularly careless, everything is, well, bonded back down. None of it is lost, none of it is come off with the wash coat. I mentioned earlier that there were secrets and sins in this painting that were intended to its salvation. Well, here begins the discovery process. Cleaning often reveals things that were not visible with the eye. In fact, cleaning often reveals things that are not visible with advanced imaging, such as UV or infrared. Paper is often used to reveal retouching or varnishes, but if there is no surface grime and varnish, the UV and infrared can penetrate to that layer of retouching, and we can't see it. This painting is profoundly dirty. Simply removing the surface grime, we can already start to see change, and my cotton swabs are quite dirty. This is an accumulation of dust, dirt, cigarette smoke, soot, and ambient accumulated particulate from the past 50 or 100 years. Using a neutral organic soap, I can remove the surface grime without attacking the varnish layer. If the client wanted the original varnish, which this is not, this is the varnish applied during the last conservation, but if they wanted this varnish or the original varnish on a previously undisturbed painting intact, I can simply use this soap and remove the surface grime without attacking that layer of natural resin varnish. It is rare, but in some instances, that's what the client prefers, and this approach allows me to meet those expectations. Already, we can see that the painting is, well, more beautiful. There's a little more subtlety in what we're seeing. But what we're seeing may not be the whole truth, because underneath this varnish, well, secrets and sins. I'm using a relatively mild gel solvent here to break down and remove the natural resin varnish. I've chosen to use a gel solvent because it will allow more time than if I'm simply using free solvents. The gel slows down the evaporation rate and prevents the solvent from spraying, so I can add it and leave it on the painting for a little longer. This is a relatively mild solvent, so I don't have to worry too much. Now, there are other solvents I could use that are more polar or, for this painting, more aggressive, and those would require a free solvent approach because they are stronger and require less time. But by slowing down the time that is required for the removal of the varnish and using a gel solvent, I have a little bit more control. One thing that I am noticing, however, is that the top layer of old varnish, perhaps an isolation layer, perhaps an original layer, is retouching. This is not terribly unexpected. I knew this painting was work done in the past. It's also interesting to see what comes off and what is revealed. Those are some of the secrets concealed by old varnish, grime, and of course retouching. Taking a pass on the areas of light and feeling confident and comfortable with the formulation of my gel, I can move on to the face. I start in a corner of the face, mostly as a test to see what results. And instantly, I can see some of those secrets. There's retouching on this face, and quite a bit of it. In fact, as I pursue cleaning this painting and removing this retouching, which is sitting on top of a layer of varnish, it becomes clear to me that the painting as I saw it, as we saw it in the beginning, is not the painting as it exists. This is not painting that the artist created. This is the painting that a conservator created. And this is one of the secrets that is revealed as we peel back the layers on top of this painting, things that we couldn't know from the get-go. And while we hope that those secrets will reveal something wonderful, the painting is in better condition than we thought, that painting is more beautiful than we expected. The reality, I've done this for many years, is that oftentimes those secrets reveal sins. Sins of the past. Sins of poor care, poor interventions, excessive conservation, or the secrets of radical damage. And this painting is no exception. As I removed the last bits of varnish, I took a look at the painting under black light and saw excessive retouching. And so I had to go back and remove all of it and reveal the sins of the past. With all of the surface grime, discolored varnish, and old retouching removed, we can see what's left of the painting, which is not much. At some point, this painting was damaged, and then it was severely overcleaned, and much of the original paint removed, and then it was repainted or reintegrated into a new finish. These are the secrets. You can see the sins revealed, and I will have to find a way to overcome these challenges and bring this painting to salvation. With all of the varnish and surface grime and retouching removed, I can now turn my attention to this paper tape that was wrapped around the edges of the painting. Because it was so saturated with varnish, I couldn't remove it using water, so I'm using a scalpel to simply scrape it off of the surface, and any paper residues left can be removed with wire later on. It's at this point that I can now turn my attention to structural issues that plague this painting. Of course, the tagging is missing, and that will get addressed later on, but before that, I need to address the tear that encroaches from the edge into the field of the painting. I'm using a technique called bridging, which is a very lightweight, minimally invasive way of supporting a tear or hole in the canvas without applying a patch or a line, which in this case would be excessive and totally unnecessary. I did just remove the lining after all. Small strands of aluminium are cut, dipped into adhesive, and then laid down perpendicularly across the tear. These little strands, once dry, will provide enough support that this tear won't open up or tent up, revealing itself after retouching and varnishing. Bridging is really effective, and it can span really big distances, but for really small distances, it's a perfect approach, particularly for one like this, where the strip line is going to cover part of the bridging anyway. Once the bridge is complete, a release film, felt, and weight are placed atop it. Several hours later, once the adhesive has been let dry, I can come back and see just how well it's been executed. And that looks great. Because the lining was removed, there's no way to adhere this painting to structure. Tapping edges were unceremonious to remove it something in the past, so I need to add new ones. And it all begins with more release film to prevent an adhesion label, and a thermoplastic adhesive film. This is the same film I use for linings, and with a little bit of heat applied, I can bond it to the canvas. Because the canvas had impregnation, it's already receptive to adhesive, so this is a very strong bond. The Belgian strip line is frayed on one end, and that's for two reasons. One is to soften the edge so that it doesn't telegraph the front of the painting, and two, to provide more surface area for the adhesive to bond to. With more surface area, we can ensure a stronger adhesion. Once it's ironed on, I will cover it with a weight with a little clapper on it, and that's a piece of oak that's going to absorb any excess moisture as it cools. I mentioned that the structure wasn't original to the painting, and I know this because it didn't fit the painting. It was too large by about an inch on each of the dimensions. So a new one was ordered, custom built to two sides, and it will provide better support. Not to mention it's not broken, so I don't have to repair it. Once the structure is assembled and squared, I can lay canvas down, size it up, see how it fits, and then begin the stretching process. Of course, I'm going to be using caps because I find them to be a superior way of adhering canvas to support. As opposed to staples, there's only one hole. There's no line in between those two holes that increase canvas, and tacking is a deliberately slower process. And slow sometimes is good. Fast yields results quickly, but it can also lead to making mistakes and then speed. But when things are slowed down, we can take more care in what we do. We're more focused on the individual task hand as opposed to the large picture. And that's one reason why I prefer tacks. Once the painting is all tacked down, I can deal with cleaning up the tacking edge. I don't like to cut this or glue this or leave it like it is. I like to fold it under and then tack it with smaller tacks. This is just something that I enjoy doing. I think it looks good, and I suppose there is some structural benefit to having a little bit more tacking support, but fundamentally, I think it just sends a message about air and precision that I like to get on my studio. After stretching, cleaning takes place, and this adds just a little bit of tension to the canvas to keep it up. And you'll see that I'm just adding, what is that, 6/4 of an inch? Not a lot, but just enough to make sure the canvas isn't loose. The keys are drilled holes so I can fish some fishing line through, and then secure these keys in place with a little tack, and this ensures that if they come loose, they won't get lost or fall in between the canvas and the structure and create a bulge. With all of the losses on this painting, it is inevitable they will require filling. And filling is necessary because these losses, these divots will reveal themselves after varnish. Even if the color matching is spot on, the texture won't be, and so we'll be able to see all of the work from a light. Not to mention, the retouching medium, the painting needs something to stick to, and it doesn't stick well to raw canvas. I'll apply the filling medium, and then use my hands to rub it off. Once I've removed a significant portion of it, relying on some old printing techniques, I can come back in with a damp cloth and remove some of the overfill. There are any number of ways to do this, and I'm just trying to choose the most efficient method. After that, yes, it's time for the swabs, because there are some areas that are just too fine to use my hand or the large towel. And once I remove all the filling and I'm happy with it, I take the painting over to the back to apply an isolation layer. And here the isolation layer is going to be for two reasons. One, it's going to help me see these colors better. The isolation layer, as you can see, makes the painting look more vibrant, and this is what it will look like after the application of the final varnish. So I can retouch these final colors as opposed to washout colors. But also, this resin is a little bit thicker, and it will fill in some really tiny voids that I wasn't able to hit with the filling medium, just to soften the edge so we don't see those gaps. Now on to retouching. What do we do when there is so much loss? Well, how do you nail it? One at a time. I know, bad joke, but it's true. Rome wasn't built in a day. You don't run a marathon, but 1 mile at a time. And you don't approach massive retouching projects like this wholesale. You break them into small little pieces. And so first, I lay down some basic color, just blocking, trying to get the form and shape of the face complete, just so I can see this as a person and not all the damage. And then I'll pick off some low-hanging fruit, finishing up the lips. I want something that's easy enough to achieve. It gives me a little bit of wind in my sails, so you feel confident about my color matching, my brushwork, how this retouching project is going. I generally leave eyes for last because they're the most difficult and also most exciting. But slowly, bit by bit, using the little clues that remain from the original paint, because there are little bits of color, little bits of paint that were removed, I can start to build back what I think this person looked like. I imagine what I think this person looked like because I have no photographic reference. I don't know what this person looked like. I can certainly look up other paintings of Sir Edward Hyde, and I did, but they're not all helpful because they're artists. So I have to use the clues that I have here. The painting I received it was not a good indication of what he truly looked like, because that was somebody else's interpretation. Remember, they had to cover all the damage that was instilled, all of those sins. So little bit by bit, just working slowly, matching color to color around it, and trying to use my understanding of the physical form of the face to complete the areas that are missing. I can start building this person back up, giving him his face back. I'm not going to say this is much like what plastic surgery does because the stakes are infinitely lower. This is a painting after all, and all of this paint is removable. It's reversible, retouching paint, so nothing I do here is permanent, unlike a doctor. And certainly, even if I'm wildly successful, it pales in comparison for what doctors do. But in some way, it is like that. I'm trying to take what's left of a face and turn it into a face. And it's hard work, but boy, when you get it, when things start to come together, it feels really, really good. But there's a pitfall with adding paint. It looks too new, and the rest of this face isn't new. It has wear to it. So I'm going to come back in and start to add little dirt specks, little canvas specks, so that my retouching blends in with the areas that weren't retouched. With all the retouching complete, it is now time for varnish. I'm chosen this way on a slightly glossier varnish from my HVLP system. Whenever I use an isolation layer, the final varnish is really just to control the sheen and have some UV protection, so I don't need to have built up layer. And spray on ensures it's a very thin, very light application. So just one pass is all it takes, and this painting is, well, all done. And there it is. The painting all conserved and restored to a better state. All the surface line was removed, all that very heavy discolored yellow varnish was removed. The paint layer that was flaking off and so unstable handling the painting was a risk, has all been well stabilized. All those living pieces of paint have been flattened down and the surface is even and smooth as it should be. The tacking edge that was missing has been replaced and is well secured to a new structure which will provide very good support going forward. But more importantly, the image, the picture itself, is whole. All those secrets that were revealed, the damage, the sins that came before, the excessive overpainting, and, well, the removal of much of the original paint, they've all been addressed. And now this painting is as close to original as it's ever been. Certainly it was a difficult process, challenging times,